So we're getting toward the end of our presentation, and now we're going to take it up a notch and look a little bit more at some of the 3D capabilities. We talked a lot about how in the family of Autodesk M&E products, we have all these animation products, great 3D products like Maya, 3ds Max, Softimage, and we want to be able to leverage those tools as well in the finishing process.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So let's talk about a heavier comp, something that is a little more challenging, where you want to recreate a 3D environment and then start to integrate more things into that environment. So we've got this ad campaign for Soul headphones that Kieran worked on, and they're really kind of different looks. So let's play one first. We'll play the one with Ludacris first, which I think is a different set of challenges than the one we're going to work on with Tim Tebow. So let's look at Ludacris first.
Okay.
I was born for this. It's in my soul. Always telling me you can. You will. You are. Listening to the greatness in my soul means I know, I have, I am. No distractions, no distortions. Hear it, believe. So what about you? Are you listening? Believe in your soul of greatness. Soul, the official sponsor of greatness.
Let's go back and look just at the pigeons real quick, because I think that's one of the funny backstories is that in this frozen moment environment, Kieran needed some pigeons in the scene, so he just went with his iPhone out on the street in Manhattan, shot the pigeons, incorporated them into the frozen moment. So again, a lot of cool behind-the-scenes stories with these types of productions. But let's talk about the story of the other technique, a lot of the other challenges that went around this version of the spot, which included Tim Tebow. He's growing up over time, so we got young Tim Tebow, teenage Tim Tebow, maybe the college Tim Tebow.
That's right.
And then finally the NFL version of Tim Tebow here, right? So again,
this is bear in mind, this is one long shot, right?
Right, one long motion control shot.
Lots of elements, foreground, background, key elements, confetti, all sorts of things, and lots of sort of creative possibilities. It's what I like to think of as the creative odyssey of versions that you could get into with something like this.
Right, so let's look at that original backplate.
Yep. So really, you might start with something like this, just an empty backplate. But I want to point out to you that, in fact, one of the problems here is that the plate just isn't long enough. It doesn't actually span the 19 seconds of the shot I just played you. So you're in a position where you need to construct something to build a track, to build an environment like we've just been doing earlier. And one idea might be to do something like this. So if I just show you how I've got this this piece right here, I'm going to just pick a point, and I'm going to get another sort of clean plate. This is this section right here. But what we'll do is we'll just pick a start point here, and I'm just doing that same gestural editing that we saw earlier to just throw together. I need that sort of 20 seconds worth of plate here.
So a little timeline editing to get started. Just editing two plates together to kind of manufacture a new clean plate that we'll then use to do a 3D track.
That's it. And I'm just going to use another editing technique here. I'm going to slip this into place. And the lines on the field certainly help us, along with the background, to get to something which is kind of a man-made clean plate built in post. And the thing that's interesting about this, Bill, is that you could then do something like this. You could take your plate here into our action environment and do an analysis of this using that camera tracker.
Right.
And guess what? You can actually trick it into thinking this is one piece of footage.
Right. Even with the lighting change slightly. And the interesting thing is the background process, so we can kind of talk over it. We've shown a lot of examples of the 3D tracking, but this is how easy it is. You just put together a shot like this, throw it in front of that camera, do an analysis, and very quickly, you can see it's 75% of the way done. It's going to basically return a new camera. So it doesn't know that that footage was edited together.
it's just like could be a lighting change, and trackers can make their way through that in normal content.
So let's look at the result. It's come back.
So, yeah, so this is now a complete environment, as you can see, doing it live for you here, so that you could see that this is just a neat way to be able to then start thinking of the scene that we then fly through. Even though there's a few artifacts on the ground, you can see that we got a flat ground there, we got a stand in the back.
The stadium is represented in the back.
And there it goes. You can see as it just sort of flies by.
So again, you can recreate that camera, and now you can put things back in front of it.
That's right. And indeed, the foreground will be coming up soon. But I want to show you how you've got a bunch of plates here that you could be working with. So it might look something like this. I'm just going to use the Flame desktop to really sort of visualize what we might want to do here, to be able to then start looking at these shots as a sort of a bank here, so you can start thinking about shots that sequence in and out as you go. So
that's why people love the Reels view, because you have basically film strips that you can kind of line up and look at. All right, so let's move back to the foreground. The challenges of the foreground is we've got 4 different takes of Tim, young Tim, adolescent Tim, older Tim. So
that's it. So
how
we've
do
got
we
to be able to
put that together?
We've got to be able to sort of navigate through between these different things, right? Right now they're just separate shots. I've got a timeline here of them just sort of cut together, but of course we're going to need something more sophisticated, perhaps. They actually used foreground wipes to do this in the original, but we had the idea of using dissolves, but then of course that's just dissolves.
Dissolves are not as elegant as, why don't we use like some of the power tools in Flame to do more of a morph type technique?
Sure, I'll have it done in the next minute.
Yeah, just do a morph real quick between those 4 shots.
Yeah, there's a little bit of work involved in that, but I've got like a work in progress here to show you the technique. Taking that, if we look at the timing view here, you can see how I translated my timeline into a set of clips that I wanted to then work with procedurally. So if we look in here, you'll be able to understand that this is a neat way to be able to then start doing this kind of transition.
Right. So the neat thing there is, even if you've organized clips in the timeline, you can convert them into the batch environment and then manipulate them back in front of that 3D camera in action. In this case, you're going to use the deform mesh applied to 2 different clips, and then you'll sort of manually force them into place, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is something where, as an artist, you can start to understand how you might want to sync the layers, but also you have this control via this mesh, which is tracked by this tracker here. You could start nuancing individual pieces of it. So you could bring in the shoulder, line up the face to match, maybe even tweak the position of the headphone if that's important, as it probably would
Align the shoulders, the arms, and do a quick transparency adjustment to morph between there. So again, that's how the foreground element came together. So warping and morphing tools exist in this package as well.
Yep.
But let's move a little bit further along. So now we want to start to composite. We've got that camera. So what can you do with that camera?
Well, I think the answer is anything. Yeah, when you have a foreground and a background and essentially the move, you can start isolations like this.
Do anything you want. Okay.
Yeah, so I think you'll be amazed at just how many options there are. Maybe too many for the time available for when you're in a session, as well as what we have right here. But so we start with this tracked environment. You remember that, and then we can start integrating things into the scene. So let's do this. Let's go and take our guy here. This is our sort of morphed timeline down here. And we'll bring that in and we'll just sort of hang it off the master camera. If you think about what's happening here, it's actually dropped back like sort of at the image plane here. But what we really want to do is we want to bring this, start separating layers in space. So by bringing it all the way forward to here, I now have some space between the foreground and background. I might want to not just have it as a flat card. I might want to use these points as a point cloud to project onto to actually reconstruct the whole environment in space.
Right.
So that's what I'm going to do right now. I was going to take these ground locators down here. We'll use just another one of our primitives here. This time we want the plate. And you'll notice that it just drops into space by default as a kind of like someone dropped a plasma TV into my scene. But what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to attach it to the ground and then just scale it up to make it big enough so that it covers that whole ground plane.
So the 3D tracker not only returned the solved camera, which recreated the camera, but it also gave you that point cloud, which gives you points in space for the actual elements that were seen in the original footage. So now you can attach individual objects and make them align to those places in 3D space.
That's exactly it. And alignment is the key, but you can see how it's kind of laid down on the ground. I just diffuse mapped it. That's going to just sort of wrap it around by default here, but what I want to do is I want to project from the point of view of the camera. And that puts things back the way they should look over here. But notice that I'm no longer looking at a flat environment. The field is really going away from me.
Yeah, that's neat.
This
it's like an optical illusion.
Yeah, this opens up this camera projection, right? It opens up the possibilities for things like this. I just unhid the stand there, the wall separately, just from a couple of primitives in this case.
Yeah, that's really neat. So again, you can just go to town now. You can put whatever you want.
Yeah, so I might want to bring in something in the midground, for example. Let's take our cheerleaders that we saw earlier. I'm just going to add, another source here, and we'll grab something. This is actually our Dropbox for working with other systems. In this case, Flare made a little comp for us, and we'll drop this into place.
Flare is the companion product of Flame.
That's right.
It can actually use that procedural compositing environment with all the same tools and feed shots back into the Flame for final composite.
And what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to bring it all the way forward so that you can see that this is going to literally sit kind of in the midground. So then you can see my layers. The cheerleaders are sitting sort of on the field there. As I slide in here, you can start to see how this is going to look. The nice thing about it, though, is that because this is motion control, it's easy for me now to do things like slide that layer within the scene.
Sure.
And
change the timing. Client wants to see them earlier or later. It's easy to do now.
Decide exactly where we want them to come on and go off.
That's great.
That's cool. Let's look at some CG crowd, shall we?
Right. So obviously, I mentioned the fact that we have all these other powerful 3D animation products in the family of M&E products. So we can take advantage of things like the crowd feature in Softimage. So it's a crowd generating tool, and maybe we want to fill up that stadium. We want to put some people back there.
Yeah, that's right.
Here you've got some OpenEXR renders.
That's right. This is actually a multi-EXR accessed directly from disk, and what we can do is drop it into the scene, and you can start to get the idea that because we have that that 3D environment there, you can have them sitting back. I also just turned on the lights here. So if we just play with our lighting, you can understand that it all sort of starts to make sense that you can rotate your lights here to light the different pieces of the scene, and then and just highlight different features within your scene.
Yeah. So now you can relight the whole environment. You could darken it down. You can
Having stuff broken in space also benefits for things like Z depth out, Z depth out.
Right, because I think the crowd looks a little too crisp. We'd actually want to have some focus on the foreground, our hero. So what we can do is output from that action a Z depth pass or Z depth pass, which actually explains, it translates the 3D position of each of the objects in the scene into something that you can use to create or recreate a depth of field effect.
That's it, and I can really kind of get cheeky with it and pick, go through the field here, or just pick my foreground character to dial in some depth of field. If I pick my actor in the background, he's going to go out of focus, and so on.
Yeah.
So it's just a nice tool for just finishing it off a little bit. When you're done, you might then go ahead and another technique, you could render this out, or you could make a BFX to cut this right into the timeline.
Well, let's take a look at that. So let's say you have the option, you want to show your customer 3 or 4 different options for what you could do once you've recreated that environment in 3D space. And then maybe like even show them those options in a sequence in the timeline.
Yeah, we got, just for fun here, we've got a couple of versions, one with the kid and the little picket fence.
Right, which was a 3D element that you generated internally.
Yeah, and then another layer here with him with sort of a red sky in the background. And I was going to just bring in the thing that we just did. So just by dragging this into the timeline here, we could start to make some decisions about exactly where we want to make that transition. So maybe on this sort of last morph here, we'll go ahead and make a transition. And the timeline is a great place to start sequencing things, right? So time, sequencing, you could just really get a good idea as how I might be able to take this, add a dissolve or even a wipe onto there. Let's just make a nice long wipe here. I'm going to just add some super soft blending here to get an effect like this. And I could even then just take that, put it on the other cut as well if I like. And you can see how easy it is to then just sort of transition in various ways. It's nice and flexible to be able to say, well, I think we want the transition there now. This is a really neat way to be able to just sort of dynamically mix your versions if the job required it.
Yeah. Again, back to the timeline to do the timing of the transitions as well. So there's a whole circular relationship there between the desktop, the reels, the timeline, the 3D compositing, procedural compositing environment. Everything can kind of link together so you have that ultimate flexibility to change things on the fly when a customer says, can't we make the transition happen 10 frames earlier?
Yeah, you're just working with a couple of pieces of footage at this point. But if they said, well, let's change the depth of field, double click here, back into the procedural environment.
That segment in the timeline represents this entire tree, which has all of the elements that you've combined. So again, a great tour, a great possibility of all the things that you can, all the tools you can really leverage in this package, Flame Premium, which is the best of editing, conforming, all the basic stuff that around a timeline. Again, the visual effects capabilities are incredible, especially when you tie in the capabilities of our animation, our 3D products. Right. And then, of course, the color grading that we saw. Real-time color grading is another way that you can use the product to as a revenue generator for your facility. So a great tour. I want to thank Kieran Walsh for providing these great examples for us. It was sort of the odyssey of never say no, because you had such a variety of examples, a real spectrum of the type of work that you can do within Flame Premium.
You want to see this one?
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that as we go out. I want to thank you for showing us everything. Thanks, it was a really interesting demo. And let's, again, take a look at the final for the Tim Tebow version of Soul headphones.
Nobody gets to define greatness for you. So, you decide to get up early, be stronger, grind harder, no distractions, no distortion. Hear it, believe. It's your legacy, not theirs. Live your soul of greatness. Soul, the official sponsor for greatness.
And with that, we're going to re-rack our show reel. You've been watching the Flame Premium Never Say No presentation. As you can see, Flame is the ultimate tool for the ultimate artist. We've got the 6 examples again that we took you through, a whole variety of treatments that we looked at.